Welcome to Run, Build, Grow, the podcast that laces up its running shoes and dives deep into the heartbeat of the communal spirit of running. I'm your host, Andrew Ware, the RunninRev, and I'm thrilled to take you on this exhilarating journey where we explore stories that go beyond the pavement. In this episode, I am joined by PJ Thompson of the Austin running community, 5 Run 2 Austin Run Club. Out there hitting those hills, PJ joins with just a positive, an infectiously positive attitude. And this is such a great opportunity, such a great conversation as we talk about what sparked this positive attitude, as we talked about what it looks like to even bring this attitude to the running community in Austin, to any of the races that he is a part of, and to the various brands and places that he works with. And so this is a great conversation as we dive into keeping this positive spirit as a focal point of the running community. So let's dive into this conversation with PJ. All right, welcome in everybody. This week I'm joined by PJ Thompson. PJ, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, definitely, man. This is, I always love talking to different people. In fact, when I interview folks, I always ask and I say, hey, who are some folks that just have awesome stories to share or all around? And many listeners will remember back to Paisley Landry, one of my first out of Virginia guests. I got Paisley on the pod. And when I asked her, she said, you got to get PJ on. And so I'm excited to finally have PJ on. PJ, let's get started here. What is your community and what makes your community awesome?
Yeah, absolutely. So my community, I'm here in Austin, Texas. So I take that as my community kind of first and foremost. But I would say with my Run Club 5 Run 2, what makes the Austin running community as well as the Run Club, special and awesome is that, we like to call it cross-pollinate here in Austin. And so everyone gets into each other's run groups. You don't find, people who only stick with their run group, which I, definitely enjoy. So, if it works for their schedule, you'll see people popping up across town in groups other than the ones they, maybe most consistently, join, which is the same with those who come to my run group. I'm not protective in that sense. So I love to have people who drop in. We run hills, so that's something we get more into later. But people come out, they get their hills, and maybe they come back the next week, maybe they don't. They're like, oh, that's probably a little bit more than I expected. But what makes it awesome is the fact that everyone kind of shares in the community, as one, and in terms of popping into different clubs.
And I think a lot of listeners probably understand that a lot. For the most part, a lot of running communities pop up in bigger metropolitan areas. I know we've, talked to Bobby Kritzelis and Bentonville, and we talked a little bit more about the smaller cities. Not to say that there aren't running communities in small towns, but what has it been like for you? Austin is an absolutely ginormous city, and an even bigger metropolitan area when you take in all the suburbs. What's it been like for you to, make your mark in Austin, for your run group? What's it been like? You talk about this shared community. And one of the things that I think of, especially here in Hampton Roads, is when it's such a big community and you want to start a run club, it's not that you want your run club, you don't want your run club to be better, right? You want your run club to be the best that it can be. And in doing that, you want to carve out your little niche of what your run community is going to be. And you talked about hills, but so what has that been like for you to create a community, to carve out a space for running community in a big place like Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it perfectly. And so kind of just to add on, and what has become our niche is, like I said, we're middle of the week. And so in trying to add to the running community and not take away from it.
Oh man, I love that.
When I first started it, what I originally looked at was, when do other groups run, what days, what times, and let me not just add on to the same day, but be slightly different. So let me not be there's a 6 a.m. Tuesday group. Let me not be a Tuesday 6:30 a.m. that runs hills as an option, which is okay. But I wanted to try to stay as far out of a schedule of any others at the time that existed. And so with us, middle of the week, and again, kind of to go back, the story was, my coach running Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, for the most part, it was track, hills, and long run weekend. That's what I was doing. And as he said, you need some middle of the week easy miles. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be out here running, let me see if anyone else wants to join. So that's where originally, at the time, it was St. Elmo Runners, which is kind of the neighborhood we started in. Later became 5Run2 to the point of trying to expand across all of Austin, which, the area code down here, 512. And so kind of a play on that, 5Run2. And you see other groups out there, Chicago and LA and Seattle who kind of play on those area codes. But kind of back to the point of adding to the community was, running hills on Wednesday. I say people who show up, like, I won't necessarily run this route myself, but in the fact that other people are showing up and committing to the route, to the hills, 6:30 in the morning, on the other side of daylight savings time where it's, dark in the morning and we are all still out there together getting those miles in. Like, that is really the community aspect of it. Because, I'm not driving 30 minutes across town as I currently have to do to get there on a Wednesday. I would easily just run outside my front door. But in knowing other people are going to be there and the benefit of running hills, I'm like, okay, I'm going to show up, less for myself. I'm going to show up because I know other people are going to be there. So I think that also goes back to like how we also hold each other accountable as it comes to, running.
And what's it been like for you, not just to have your own little niche space for what you want to do, for you to gather together, but then you also talk about, it's not just you're okay with, right? You're okay with other people coming in yours and vice versa and everything like that. So as you're building a running group, as you're looking at 5Run2 and St. Elmo's, what you were before, and you're building it, how much of that was also getting out into the running community and just being an active part? You have people who, they're runners and one day they just want to start a running community. Myself, that was me. I mean, having grown up where I'm now living, it was a little bit easier. I had a little bit of the background, but I wasn't able to necessarily get to a lot of clubs. And so I had to kind of start my own because that's where I was. But I also know a lot of people, we've had a few guests who've, they use their experiences from other clubs that they've been able to be a part of to maybe help to build something in a space where they don't have it. So what did that look like for you as you're starting to do St. Elmo's, as you're starting to look towards 5Run2? What did that look like for you as you're building this community?
Yeah, absolutely. So living in Southeast Austin, at the time for me and the day of the week that I needed to run, there wasn't a group in that immediate area. So, no classic 5-mile radius, there wasn't where I could quickly be there in 5 to 10 minutes and get together with a group of people. So to my take, I was like, well, I have 18 weeks of training I'm going to be doing. So if I'm going to be out here, let me see if anyone else wants to show up. And that's where, again, St. Elmo Runners was started out of. And so, by looking that there were no groups that existed in that pocket, that first week I put it on social. I was like, all right, it's here. Y'all been waiting on it. We're launching this Wednesday. See you there at the time, 6 a.m. So I was pumped. That very first week showed up, 0 people. So it was the wife and I who came out, and I was like, well, I have my training to do. I'm going to be here. So be it. But starting then at St. Elmo's, and at the time where I wanted to kind of, it's almost like seem like it was planned, but also kind of naturally made us different. Some things we've gravitated toward initially were like preview runs of local races. So you have the Austin Marathon, you have the Cap 10K, which is like one of the largest 10Ks, largest one in the state, one of the largest ones in the country. And so we starting to do preview runs of the course weeks prior to the race itself, because I myself would run the trail around town. It's flat-ish. And then I would go to race day Austin and just blow up on the hills. And so I knew other people who had did the same. So I was like, all right, let's get together about a month prior to the date and run a portion of the course. And we're doing that actually. This will be our 3rd year coming up in a few weeks that we're doing this. And we did it again in April. We started to do people travel together from their run groups. That's nothing new, but putting a name on it as simple as like runcations. I mean, that was kind of something I wanted to start doing. So we started to like put out like, hey, this is our target race. We'll train over these weeks. We'll do this dinner if we can, this shakeout, try to get swag, basically make it a little bit more formal. And so those have been ways that we've started to like make the group a little bit different than what I, over time saw. It wasn't a case of like what doesn't exist right now and I want to be different in that way. they were just things that, the group, like I said, naturally kind of began to kind of form and mold its way into, in terms of like a few of us are starting to go to these different races, have target events on the calendar. Like, let's just make it a little bit more formal. And that's where I would like reach out to brands and be like, hey, like, if you want to send some stuff our way, I have 10 to 15 people who are training toward this. Certainly could use whatever it may be from a brand perspective. And, typically from their perspective, they're like, we're happy to kind of put either shoes on their feet, socks or gloves, hats, whatever, or nutrition. And so that's where I also try to make the runcation a little bit more of a thing, as opposed to just, taking it outside of the text chat, to make it a little bit more like engage, entice people to participate, knowing that, hey, maybe some brands are going to tap in. There are maybe 15, 20 of us who are going to participate. The hometown races are great, but I or most people like to travel, so let's also put something on the calendar far enough out where we could budget and plan for it. And so that's where also we have started to like run as a group together.
And it seems like, community is something that helps to almost improve you as a runner. I feel like I'm hopefully I'm not reading too much into, hearing your stories and stuff like that. And maybe improve isn't the right word. Support you as a runner. That's probably where I wanted to go. You're someone that loves that community support, that likes to maybe share some miles with folks. What about your personal run journey? Like where did this begin? Or have you always kind of enjoyed sharing the miles? Where did this desire for community, for fellowship, for joining others, where did this start, and where did this running journey begin?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, as a kid, I'd like to think I was always active. It was more like kickball in the street and riding bikes across town kind of a thing. So that's kind of, street lights on, it's time to go home kind of thing. But, I'd say as a kid, I was semi-active. I mean, in middle and high school, played football and track because you had to, your coach was like, football in the fall, track in the spring.
Yep.
Wasn't so much into basketball. I played it one season because friends did. And even as I got out then of college, which I didn't play, sports then, but once I got out and I moved to Dallas originally, not knowing anyone besides, the young lady I was dating at the time, and then my boss and his wife. And so in a city the size of Dallas, in that metroplex, not knowing anyone, that is where running became, my outlet, because I mean, just not knowing anyone, and it was also a way for me to like explore the city. So, that's where I first took running up, my kind of way I fell into it. The Dallas, or at the time, White Rock Marathon, my boss was like, hey, it's the marathon relay. We need someone to run the 5-mile leg of it. I don't know how far I was kind of running at that time, but I was like, sure, I'll do it. Especially with, my boss asking me to do it. I feel like I had to. And so, I ran that first year, that 5-mile leg. The next year I ran the half marathon there in Dallas. And then the bug had been, bitten at that point. And it was, the hot chocolate runs and other, I drove to Baton Rouge for the Louisiana Marathon as my first, because, you get to an expo and they're like, hey, sign up today, $10 off. And so I'm like, well, I mean, I'm losing money if I don't sign up for this. Okay. So I got to do it. So drove to Baton Rouge, did that the first year at Louisiana, put that marathon together, which was awesome. And then it was, marathon and 5K and other events after that. And so running became really outside of moving to a city where I knew no one, taking up just a way to remain active, semi-explore the city. And then as I moved to Austin, it became where, like, I certainly found, like you said, that fellowship, that community. The group chat throughout the week was a planning toward what are we doing Saturday, what are we doing Sunday, or nights of the week. People. I listening to another episode you had with Ashley, Ashley V, where she talked about what you learn about people who you run with, because we're out here for 3 to 4 days a week, 2 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday. So you get naturally asked every question in the book. And I am someone who is very much like, you and I have met, first names have been passed and have shaken hands. And then I quickly get into, what's bothering you? How's life? Tell me about your kids. Like, just like, you only have one life to live. So I mean, I don't spend a whole lot
Yeah.
of time in the honeymoon phase. So that's where, like, as a community person, as a run group leader, just as someone who will run alongside you, like, I really do want to get to like know people. So I ask a lot of questions. Probably I'm a bit of a chatty Cathy on runs. I do. I mean, I laugh at it because I feel like there's a bit of a like alter ego that comes out when I run, especially on race day. But even just but in training, I mean, I am just chatty Cathy. But in work day to day, I mean, I'm pretty like focus locked in, crunching spreadsheets kind of a thing. So running is absolutely that outlet from two young kids at home, as well as from work, where I'm a little bit more like focused and kind of reserved.
Yeah, how much of that, do you think is running feels like an outlet that you can express yourself? I know there's the nerd comes out in me sometimes, but all the science of just, your inhibitions go down when you run because you're working your brain. I mean, that's the science behind it. But how much of that for you is, one kind of maybe opening yourself up to what's happening around you, to allowing the spirit of the community to kind of carry you forward, to want to learn and grow together, to becoming closer. How much does that play a role in, I mean, maybe not even just the beginning, but even this continued journey that you're going on? Because to me, I love this. I've said this hundreds of times. I love the starting line of a race because the starting line of the race is tens of thousands of stories about how that person has gotten to the line. And so I'm guessing kind of like you, when I'm in that starting corral, like the way that I'm getting rid of my nerves is I'm talking to folks. Like I'm having fun.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm pacing a friend, like we're chatting, I'm chatting with other folks in the corral, like, getting all that stuff together. How much of that, do you do? What's that been like for you? How much do you think it helps you out? It builds you up as well as kind of build up the community around you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And you said it. Like I mentioned that that alter ego on race day. Like I am over the moon in the
Mm,
start corral, and once that gun goes off, and for me, I'm glad that like when I moved away from like race times per se, like I let my run coach, like he gives me the workouts. He can focus on like, okay, based on this, we should move you up, so on. And I'm like, sure, I will just keep showing up doing the work. But I really have like dropped the concern in terms of like my focus being on times where that has allowed me to really focus on and enjoy more immediately enjoy race day. And so
mm,
I'll give an example. So like just did Berlin this past September, and there's a woman, like complete stranger to me, but she was running with a picture of her ultrasound on her back. So she's pregnant. She's running a picture of her ultrasound on her back,
mm.
and she's kind of shimmying along as we go up this hill. And I just give her a pat on the back and say that you got this. We also had like the same branded tank top on, but again, mind you, I don't know her, but we wore the same thing. So every person I saw with that same hoodie, that tank on, I felt like I knew, let alone just everyone out there who had this shared, date on the calendar that all showed up to do the same event. Couple weeks pass, I see a friend request from this woman, and she's since delivered her baby. And so I'm thinking about the memory of like where I like gave her that pat on the back, and then she and I were kind of like ping pong back and forth on
Mm.
the day. And so my comment to her, not really knowing her, was just like, son, like, know how strong your mom is. I've only had one chance to meet her, and I thought for me that's where like the community aspect of running is, because you can have 10, like you said, 10, 20,000 plus strangers on race day, or even 500 or so strangers on race day, who all again had circled a date on the calendar, put in the work from taking time from friends, from family, skipping out of work or showing up a little late, the strength, the little things. We've all been doing this, not necessarily together, but we have in a way. And
Mm.
then it all comes together on that weekend. Like that is the feeling that I live with the entire race weekend, because I know what we've done. So when I, like I said, put times out of my mind now over a year ago when I had a coach and I could focus on just doing the work and enjoying myself, like that is what fulfills me the most, is the stories that I know, because in part have kind of lived through the same, trying to fit workouts in with a 4 and 2-year-old. Like that has been the challenge this year and last year. Work is demanding coming out of fourth quarter. I'm in sales, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and all that stuff. When am I going to get my workout in? But granted, when I toe the start line in like a couple weeks in Houston, I know, and in March in Napa and so on, like I know we've all had to manage through kids or busy work or travel schedules or sickness. And I'm just like, man, this is what it's about. Cause like no one out here is a stranger to me. And that comes out in every video that like I do on race day. I've had some pretty like organic, unplanned, not knowing someone else was filming, where later they're like, hey, I got this video of you on the course. And I am like I said, alter ego, next level energy coming through a cheer station. And I looked at that and I'm just like, that is me, like on race day. And so, yeah, community is, the community is not only myself. I mean, I feel like I said, no one is a stranger, and that is me on race day. It's pats on the back, words of encouragement. In the last mile, I'm like, all right, let's I'm just shouting out, let's hook that caboose, let's hitch this wagon, let's go. And so I'm trying to pull people along. Like that is my energy on race day, to the point of like, we are one big community.
I think about it, and listeners, go and check out PJ's Instagram, because it is just full of just running smiles, which is always cool. And, it reminds me of like Eliud Kipchoge and, Dakota Lindworm, whose last name is not Lindworm anymore, but I cannot remember what her new married name is. And so listeners message me and I'll remember. But it reminds me of like that class of folks who they always have a smile on their face. And when, the commentators or anybody asks like, you're always smiling, what's up with that? And it's almost like smiling through the pain, which for a lot of us, it's the joy of running. And I love that sentiment of allowing the joy of running to kind of take over what you're doing, and almost to let it overcome maybe what that pain could be. Because you have to imagine, in a lot of ways, we're doing things that we're pushing our bodies. We're trying to be the best version of ourselves. I don't know what your PRs are, but I imagine, you had to push yourself a lot. But I can also imagine that, you're coming through and you're helping folks and you got that smile on your face. For you, how important for you is that positive attitude? Like, how infectious does it become? Someone struggling. I mean, I know I've gotten to the end of a half marathon. I've just been dead. And someone will just like either run up next to me, give me a big cheer, give me a smile or something like that. For you, like, what is your experience with maybe that like infectious positive energy?
Yeah, totally. So I mentioned that like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule, I was doing kind of just the workouts, but I wasn't doing the easy miles. So I was doing like the track on Tuesday or repeats. I was doing hills or so on Thursday, and then a long run. So my coach, my first run coach, for the run group, his whole saying was to run with joy. And to his quick backstory, born and growing up in war-torn Burundi, like he and a cousin of his survived an unfortunate like burning down of a school where he had to hide under the bodies of his classmates. And more than half of his body, my previous run coach, more than half of his body, he still has visible burn marks from that experience, and has written a book about it and so on and so forth. And so that he is my first run coach, was also the first time I took running, I say seriously. I was 8 marathons in at that point, 7 marathons in at that point, but they were all just me going out, kind of doing my thing, never changing paces or hills or any type of workout. And for this one as my 8th, I was like, I'm going to take it seriously. And so, committing to that process, I realize how difficult it actually was showing up with a plan. And so that's where I had to remind myself, listening to his message of like, if he can show up with the mindset of to run with joy, with what he's had to go through, and running had taken him as far as it had through scholarships and leading now this amazing run group, then all I can do is show up and continue to run with joy. So I would say, again, going from the like, I'll just kind of do it on my own, what feels good, there's really no rhyme or reason, I'm just going out, to, okay, I now want to, and I was fundraising at the time. So I was like, sure, I'll seek a PR. I'm fundraising for a group. I want to take this more seriously. And with that, that's where the whole mentality of like, if he can do it, I can do it. If he can still put a smile on his face, then in the Texas heat, training for that September marathon, so it's August, if this 18 and 20 mile workout, as much of a grind as it is, like, it's going to be a grind. Sure, 5:30 in the morning, it's already 80 plus degrees. It's not great, but I can continue to show up with that smile. And so that is where I felt like the foundation, or that feeling of, it was first cemented for me to show up to not every run, but to most runs and races with a smile and like a passion and an energy and like a next level, like, out of body experience for trying to be the most positive person on race day. And I'll tell you, like, where that was needed on the flip side, where I went into a marathon completely undertrained, first kiddo, new job, unable to put in the miles that I had to, but I had already committed and was also fundraising again. So I was like, kind of have to do it. So I had raced New York, and by the time I got to Central Park, was absolutely broken from the undertraining. I was teaching at the time, and so this is 2020, teaching government and history and teaching those topics in that 2020 cycle, teaching those subjects as well as the first kid, and I was just a zombie and not sleeping well and undertrained. The recipe, I guess you could say, of those three, by the time I got to Central Park and its hills, like, I was literally in tears walking through Central Park. Didn't have the sunglasses to hide it at that point, and I was just like, I felt as exposed I could potentially be exposed in terms of having never experienced that. And so that's where someone else patting me on the back in Central Park, telling me, it's all right, brother, let's keep moving. And I, from walking, just went back at least to like a shuffle and a walk, run to get to the finish. So as far as like my two experiences of what cemented my joy or passion for running, my first run coach, given his literal life experiences and near death experience, to what was one of the hardest times of both professionally as well as personally, with a first kiddo, not sleeping, and then trying to be your best at a job at that time, undertrained in a marathon, which is never a great thing, let alone that course. I underestimated the bridges for hills in New York. I'm like, it's Manhattan. It's flat. What are you talking about? There's no hills.
Yeah.
And I found that out the hard way. And so the recipe for a less than stellar day came together, and it took someone else's, energy and positivity to kind of help boost me to that finish line.
It's always, it's like when the tables have turned and you're the one that's in need of help, how much that just reiterates to us, I think, why we do all of this, right? Mm-hmm. Not just why we run, but I think, like you just mentioned, why we carry that spirit of positivity in us, because, what we've received from the running community is what we want to put back into it, right? And I think that there's so much of that within all of this, that your coach just being this whole positive person in your journey, and you wanting to offer that back to folks too. And then just you feel at your lowest up there in New York, and yet someone is there to make sure that you get to the finish line, right? Because you don't just you don't start a marathon and not finish, right? We see DNFs all the time, but that DNF is so hard, and everybody on that course wants to see every single person cross the finish line. And so I just think, like, how much that positive attitude then becomes a part of your identity. It's like, man, that person helped me to get across the finish line in New York. I want to make sure that so-and-so person who I'm, running next to at Houston in a couple of weeks, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like imagining you on the Houston course right now, like running, and, same thing, like somebody's running, they're just, they're defeated. And then, PJ runs past him, and it's like, or not past him, but even maybe you stop and pace him a little bit. It's like, come on, man, you got this, you got this. It's we're getting close. Let's just get 1 mile at a time, 1 mile at a time. What a great and like supportive atmosphere that you can create, and to kind of transform that a little bit to the last place that I really look at is how running has kind of shaped the way that you now do give back, right? You're a run club leader. You don't just lead a run club, but man, you are out at like all the run clubs, making the rounds, getting around, supporting folks, getting to know folks, but you're also helping out in the community. And so what is it about running that makes you want to not just give back to the running community, but also to the greater community, to the Austin community, or the community in Texas or wherever? Like, what about this sport makes you want to make the world a better place?
Sure. So, I mean, I feel like running, unlike any other sport, you can pick up a basketball and go shoot at a hoop by yourself. With a football, I mean, I guess you can go out and just kick it from end to end, but you can't really throw it to yourself. Whereas with running, for any beginner, and I know there's a debate in terms of like all you need is a pair of shoes. Like, this isn't a gear debate in terms of the cost of it, but as far as generally speaking, like I ran in cotton tee yesterday, so let's assume cotton tee, shorts, and a pair of shoes. You can, as a beginner, on a solo trip out your front door to the mailbox, around the block, a mile away, around the trail, whatever that distance may be, take up the sport of running. And that's how easy it is to begin. And from a matter of like giving back, there are a couple of organizations for myself personally who, if either through like a cancer diagnosis and a specific foundation who I fundraised for multiple years, that is one, among many, diagnoses I feel like does impact someone who unfortunately has had to encounter that diagnosis. And so that is where, from a matter of giving back, it's not a matter of like changing a stigma, but I make sure I post in terms of like, there's nothing wrong with getting a charity bib or running for a charity. A lot of that is seen as like, oh, that was their way into a world major kind of a thing. Like, I'm not pursuing, all those things, so on and so forth. It is truly a matter of like my dad, again, to his cancer diagnosis and kicking its butt today, that was the first reason that I decided to support the foundation that I did, as well as the fact the young lady I'm now married to with 2 kids, she was fundraising for the same charity and I donated $20. And from there, I've continued to, do the same. So it kind of just happened organically, but I've seen the impact of, those funds raised to the lives of those who are, seeking treatment, and elsewhere. On the flip side, locally, the trail that we have in Austin, millions of people hit that trail, both locals as well from out of town, day in and day out. But to the group, the organization that maintains and are the stewards of that trail, they need fundraising and development as well. So that's where, my, marketing or support and, trying to get their message out of like, hey, the trail is great. I know as Austinites, Austin Marathon's in 2 months. We're all out here hitting the trail, but do you know who maintains it? This foundation, they plant X number of trees. They're doing these kind of things, adding sidewalks and everything underneath the sun. So in terms of like giving back, and there are many other ways to do it, and I respect everyone's path in terms of their choice and how they causes that they fundraise for. I'm just saying that these are mine, but these are ones where running has allowed me to like support and help lift up both from the community aspect of a trail and making sure it's maintained to something a little bit more personal. Again, like I said, my father who's living today with colon cancer, my grandmother who passed years ago, but unfortunately had her own bout with both age, diabetes, and cancer. Like, those are personal things to me. And I know many other people who encounter that diagnosis, which is always, very like, it's a challenge to read that news when I do have to see it, because I know the road that they have ahead. So, I'm doing it for the support of them and not, a 6-star or a unicorn tattoo running up, in Beantown or any of that stuff. Like that couldn't be farther from the reason that I run, which also goes to the races that I choose to run. Like for the most part, choose to run races that are, call it mid-tier or smaller towns, because I feel like I can get closer to the race organizer, learning from them. Like they live big races as well, but without those bigger supporters, I can talk to that race organizer and learn, like, why did you start the race? What does this community mean to you? Getting involved with local shops and businesses and so on and so forth. I feel like I'm able to have a more direct path in doing that, saying like, hey, I'm paying my biggest expenses, hotel and flight. I'm going to be out there. I'm just looking to kind of learn from you, connect, maybe visit some restaurants and so on and so forth that are doing pasta night for the marathon. Let's put together a coffee shakeout so we can get people together, all back to the point of community, as well as giving back to like a local restaurant. So that's my take on how running helps me build community, both in personal matter as well as then from a trail, but also when I am out and about traveling and trying to connect with like race directors and run groups and all of those things, which kind of keeps me away from doing as much of the, call it, bigger city races, where I don't lose kind of, at least for myself, the my reasons for really doing it.
Yeah. So I mean, and it begs the question. You talk about looking at a lot more like mid, lower tier kind of races, more localized races and stuff like that. But when you are looking for not just races, but brands even to partner with, what are the opportunities? What are the things that you're looking for? What are those parts of your identity of who PJ is that you're hoping to be able to express in these partnerships? Like, what are you looking for?
Sure. I love the question. This is a plug. Brands, if you're listening, this is how we can work together. Yeah. No, what I really want to make sure of, and I've worked in sales and advertising my entire career. I'm in tech, specifically social media today for my career and paycheck. So I somewhat even naturally pay a lot of attention to the advertising, branding, and social media that companies put out when I consider also working with them. So, not being within their four walls, their social media, their advertising should be, a reflection of who they are as well as the type of people they want to bring in. So that's the first thing I pay attention to is, are they representing people literally from all different backgrounds? And it's not, a case of this is National XYZ month. Let's have someone in our branding that looks like that. 6 months from now, does that same person still have a presence in their marketing and media? Like that's how as a 15 plus year advertising brain, like that's the kind of stuff I pay attention to. And so when I'm thinking about working with these brands, it's not I post from a material standpoint, it's not I post and I get a reshare. Like I follows, likes, comments, that is, again, that's not my concern. Have 2 kids, have a mortgage, have a wife, have a run group. Like those are my concerns, and trying to be a good tax paying citizen. So when brands are like, hey, post, we'll send you some stuff, post in it and we'll reshare. I'm like, that's not what I am. That's certainly not what I'm here for. So I look with brands that have something that is longer term. So like, how can we do something together? So I feel obviously, hey, brand, you've reached out either from, the type of message that I'm trying to convey and deliver and naturally kind of put out and being myself. So I hope that that's something that resonates with your audience and can over 3 months, a quarter, 6 months, a year, something more than, we have a campaign that we're running. Campaigns are short-lived. I'd say the TLDR is like, I'm less of a campaign person. I'm more of I'm almost an employee. Like I'm trying to be here for months on end, and we are building this thing up together. And I also, like I said, do I see people from all different backgrounds represented in their marketing and their media? And is the brand more interested in campaigns or relationships?
And it helps us to really place ourselves in that too, because I think as a running community, we know that nothing happens immediately, right? You don't go out and just, run. I mean, you do just go out and run a PR, because the first time you do something, it's a PR. However, you don't then go out and run the second time and expect to just keep doing it, right? It's such a great metaphor to think of, for that message to not just resonate once or for a little bit, but for that message to stick around. I think that's a lot of what, this podcast here, I want it to be about, because when we talk about community, when we talk about running together, when we talk about what's happening, that's a message that lives beyond that, one training cycle, right? I don't want to get, I've done the thing where you get a group of people together, you all train for one race, and then after that race, you're done. That's cool. It has its place. I love to see the communities that, it's not about that one race. It's not about that one goal, but it's about what happens beyond. Like, right. I want to think about, okay, so I'm training for X race. Like, we're going to train together. Yay. But we're even thinking beyond that race, right? I don't want it to just go away. I want it to be something that lasts. I want it to be something that continues to go, because like, to me, that's community. Community is not just a one-off thing where we participate together, maybe, at one point in time, but community is something where, it can really transform and change the way we exist. I mean, back to just how you have become such this like positive and infectious spirit of the people that have sort of molded you and made you and kind of brought you to where you are now, for you to be able to take that and to do it in other ways, to connect with other people. What are your hopes and dreams? Like, why is PJ continuing to run? Why is PJ continuing to do 5 Run 2? Why is PJ looking for his next race? Like, what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's see. So I would say, I think for me, like, again, when I first got into running, again, it was more as like a relay team, but it was also like not knowing the city at the time. It was Dallas, so I was trying to figure that out. Running by feet was a good way to kind of explore. But then as I relocated to Austin, again, not knowing anyone but a pair of coworkers, the trail and running within a group became the way that I explored the city. But early on, in some of those run groups, and this was pre like the last 3 years before run groups really took off. So at the time, this was 2012 I moved to Austin. So at that time, there were basically paid options for run groups, but very few like accessible or free groups to run with. So with that, there were a lot of, we were only training for, say, many folks are training for Boston or, waterfront up in Canada or whatever it was. There were very specific training efforts, but less of the, we'll get together afterwards or on weekends, or, what's life like outside of paces and workouts and all of those things. Like, it became kind of exhausting and only being able to speak to that, as opposed to like, who am I as a person?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. Like, I'm not getting to know you at all. Like, I'm in sales. That would be like me only asking one of my team members about their numbers, but never, how their holidays went, how was their New Year's, what's going on in their life. And so with run groups, that's where I feel like, less as a run group leader, but if you are in a run group in general, I feel like it is all kind of incumbent on us to be like that community driver, that partner, that person who is asking other people who, we run with. Don't always run with the same person. Try to, don't try, please do, get to know other people in the run group, asking them like, not only how's life, but as they respond, listen and like, oh, like, well, what's going on? Tell me about that. Like, that's where I dig in with people quickly. Again, just being in management, like, I listen and dig in. So in my run group, people are used to it at this point. Like, you tell me like, man, work has been XYZ, like, I'm going to follow up. Just, wherever life may be going, like, I'm someone who asks a lot of those questions. So what's next for me and what I want to be known for, what I want 5 Run 2 to be known for is, as many run groups say, again, all pace is welcome. Come here, be yourself. Like, nothing against them. And I certainly believe the same for ours. But what I only hope to continue to do is provide people a space at the middle of the week. And when we do our kind of activations on weekends and runcations, that when people show up, that they know that it's not only me who's responsible for creating and building this community. Like, as you show up, like, you are an active participant in this as well. And I need you to also be, trying to drive this community forward, act as a co-op. If there's something that could be better, your feedback is welcome. Like, you're just not here. Like I say, when I drive across town on Wednesdays, like, my kids go to bed Tuesday night. I don't see them Wednesday morning because I'm here with the runner group. So I am very appreciative of everyone's time, but I know that everyone is taking something outside. They're taking time out of their day to be here. So with that, help me and be one of those people who does get back in a sense of talking to people who don't look like you, who you don't know, who you haven't met yet, figuring out what's going on with their life. They will do the same with you. And it becomes a very fruitful, it's less transactional, and it becomes a very fruitful encounter over the miles that we're sharing. So that's really what I want to be known for. It's not I'm myself or my run group, we're training only for this event to knock out PRs to then go race, at said race, wherever that may be. Like, it's like a come and go as you are. Like I said, in Austin, we like to cross-pollinate run groups, and people, do a lot of that, and I'm all for it. I hope it's an outlet which are like, you know what? I can be there, be myself. I'm not worried about looking silly or saying something silly, because likely PJ has done enough of that for me. So I just want people to, again, show up, be themselves, because for too long, like, I feel like I certainly kind of followed the crowd, and this was pre coming to Austin. This was, again, middle high school. I feel like maybe there's always a degree of that where you kind of follow others, and I felt like running became my voice. Like, where oftentimes people are like, man, you're like, friends from high school, they're like, man, you're always running, you're always here, you're always there. But early on, they were like, I can't do that, I couldn't run, I have no idea how you do it. But running became like my expression of who I think I always was, and it just became this matter of like exploration. But not knowing anyone in the two first cities in my adult life, Dallas and Austin, I knew anyone, where it was the outlet for me. And I've just through it met so many like people, organizations, and provided opportunities that I honestly can say, like, I never thought in a million years that I thought would have come along from either brands or publications or trips that have come. So I would just say, like, run because it makes you feel good. Run to be an active participant in this great sport, in this community, contribute to the community, and just keep showing up.
All right, let's hit these end of podcast questions as we wrap up. We're going to start off with a little this or that. Speed work or long run?
Long run.
Morning or evening run? Okay, morning or evening run?
Morning.
Summer or winter run?
Winter.
So like 70 degrees.
Yes, I'm glad you clarified for Texas. Yeah, 70 degrees.
All right. What do you listen to while you run? Music, podcasts, nothing?
Music.
All right. What is your favorite distance to race?
I'd have to say the half marathon. The marathon is, the 10K I like, but I feel like the half marathon, for me, I have to put in a longer period of training, which I appreciate the journey, but I'm not completely demolished afterwards like a marathon. Like, the leap from training miles to race distance for a half is much more doable than the leap from training miles for a full to the full itself. I'm like,
oh man, for sure. For sure. And lastly, PJ, can you give our listeners a reason to join their local run club?
Join your local run club, because whether you believe it or not, and I certainly believe this, whether you believe it or not, your run club needs someone with your personality, someone who has your background, someone who has the ideas that you are sitting on, that you can bring those into that run club and make it better. So whether you may be doubting that you could contribute to a run club in that way, but I firmly believe everyone has something that they can add to a run club. So I would say join it for that reason, that you can contribute and build this community.
Awesome. Y'all heard him. Get out there and join them. PJ, thank you so much for joining.
Andrew, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thanks for the time.
Again, I want to thank PJ for coming on the pod, for sharing his story, his journey, his community with us. And you know what? If you join this podcast to hear about PJ, I want to invite you to go back and listen to some other episodes. If you're in the Austin community, go back, listen. Paisley Landry was episode 26, and Ashley Van Leusen, who PJ actually mentions in this episode, was episode 37. Again, just like every story, those are so awesome to sit and listen to. Even if you've already listened to them, go back and check them out again. I also want to highlight a couple of other episodes. You'll remember back in episode 30, I had Raz, and on 38, I had Ezra, two members of the Los Angeles running community. If you haven't seen just the devastation from the wildfires out there in Los Angeles, I reached out to Ezra just to see, hey man, is there anything we can do to help out there? I'm going to drop some links to a couple of places where you can help support some of the relief organizations for these wildfires. So, if you want to go back and listen to those episodes, hear about the awesome community, running community in Los Angeles, around Los Angeles, especially in Pasadena, and you want to go and support those organizations, help these communities recover from wildfires. I want to thank you so much for making it through this episode, for joining me for this conversation, hanging out here on Run, Build, Grow. If you have a great story to share, I am always looking for more guests. I'd love to hear it. Email me at andrew@runninrev.com. Don't forget, you can also find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, Strava. You can also subscribe to my Substack, and hopefully I'm going to be starting to have some more articles, some more posts coming out on there. You can find all those links in the show notes. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to this podcast if you're listening to it. Again, if you're here and you join me for PJ, I'd love for you to become a regular listener. So head on over, subscribe to the podcast, or you can head over to runbuildgrow.com to catch every episode. You can also jump on to Apple Podcasts and leave a quick rating and review. If you're on Spotify, drop a comment on the episode. Let me know what you love about this episode, about this podcast. Just a simple way to help others discover the show, and let me know what's resonating with you. And you know what? If you leave a comment or you leave a review on Apple, I will give you a shout out in the next episode because I enjoy that so much. You know what? If you want to go that extra mile, support the podcast, keep it going strong, help to keep the lights on in a way, head on over to runbuildgrow.com/support. That's in the podcast notes. And you can drop a one-time tip if this episode really hit you, or you can become a monthly recurring donating member, support the podcast regularly. Every contribution helps to make all of this happen, just the small little things, those fees and all of that stuff. I want to thank you for being here, for being part of the journey. And until next time, get out on the run and make every mile count. Thank you.